Good evening, everyone, on the MYBC Consulting Facebook page. It's time for another super duper exciting MYBC Virtual Bookstore Author Series, where colleagues of mine send me people that I need to chat about books, or I happen to find out about people that have written books, or people approach me when they've written books to chat about the process. So I'm going to let the person introduce himself. Our two-time author tonight is.
My name is Brett O'Reilly, and I've written two books. The first one is a novelette called Lord of Playgrounds. The second is a collection of short stories called Aftertaste and Other Stories, both of which are horror.
Ooh, so first of all, Brett, where are you coming in from on this big blue marble? Where do you live?
I live in Cloverdale in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada.
That's kind of how we know each other, is in our sphere, we tend to go out into our community in the same similar sphere of people. And I was so excited, Brett, when I saw that you had written some books and you had, did I reach out to you or did you reach out to me?
You actually reached out to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whenever I know a friend that has decided to take their creative spirit and write a book, I just want to showcase it, because the more we keep each other in our creativity, I swear the magic is going to start to heal the world all over the place. So the first question that I have, because it's a word I've never heard before, what is a novelette?
Okay, there's short stories, which are generally anywhere from 1,000 words to 10, 15,000 words.
Okay.
Novellas are actually about approximately 20,000 words to 30,000 words, 35,000 words.
Okay.
And right in between there, in that 10,000 to 20,000 word range, is the novelette. And some people will say that, anything over 15,000 is still a novella.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to gatekeep on that, but I prefer the term novelette. And my first book, Lord of Playgrounds, is just over 15,000 words. So novelette.
So novelette meaning many stories in one book, or each novelette is about 15?
Novelette is between 15 and 20,000 words. So it's one story, one complete story.
Okay. And is that story in a book of other stories different? I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around exactly the kind of books you write, that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah, no, Lord of Playgrounds is a self-standing novelette, as in it's published on Amazon as one complete story.
Okay.
Lord of Playgrounds, one complete story, just over 15,000 words.
And your second book? Describe it.
My second book is Aftertaste and Other Stories, and that consists of 11 different short stories, ranging from about 2,000 words to approximately 11,000.
Okay, so let's go back to the novelette. I like that word. It kind of rhymes with my name, Jeanette. So what was your rationale? Is not the right word. What was your inspiration? That's the right word. What was your inspiration, and how did you go about taking an idea? And when you said the word horror, that's just a genre that I personally have never read. So let's get into that, Brett.
Okay, well, with Lord of Playgrounds, the inspiration came from two different places, essentially. The first point of inspiration was actually from voodoo mythology. One of the Loa is known as Baron Samedi, and he is the Lord of Graveyards. And I always just really liked the name Lord of Graveyards, and from that, I somehow came across this idea of a spirit possessing a playground and being the Lord of Playgrounds. And with that came a different idea I had, which it's a little grisly, just to warn you, but the idea of like Aztec sacrifice in that, and slitting the throat and the blood flowing down a channel. And I happened to see a slide, like a children's slide, but made out of metal, one of the ones that gets really, really hot during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this image just pop into my mind of somebody having their throat slit and that being sacrificed and that blood flowing down the slide. And from there, I just started to put together all the pieces to this novelette in which this woman ends up fleeing from a cult of personality and finding herself in the clutches of a cult of the supernatural. And these two ideas combining into Lord of Playgrounds.
It's fascinating. Oh, there's so much here that I want to unpack and come across intelligent, because it's a genre that obviously it has a following.
Yes.
Two, go ahead.
Types of horror. There's different types of horror too, because horror can include something like Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, which is a ghost story.
Right.
All the way to more extreme things. I can't think of any, well, like a film which I will never see myself is called a Serbian film. And it's a really nasty movie in which horrible people do horrible things. It's not my kind of horror, but it is horror. It's a valid subgenre within the realm of horror. But so is something like Shirley Jackson's, The Haunting of Hill House, which has no blood, has only one death, and it's not described in any detail.
Am I correct to assume that, say, Stephen King is a version of writing horror?
Stephen King writes, not all of his stuff is horror, but a lot of it is.
Okay.
And he is considered to be one of the greatest horror novelists of our time.
So from start, how did you start compiling what you wanted to do with this first novelette?
Well, there's two ways of writing, essentially. One is being an outliner, in which case you sit down and you work out your entire plot in advance, and then you write it. And then there's the way that I do, and which Stephen King I know also does, and that's a pantser. Whereas I had this general idea, and I sat down and I just started to write. I had this vague idea of what I wanted to happen. I knew what the ending of the story was. I knew where the beginning was. I didn't really know the details in the middle. But as I started writing, it just comes to me, and the characters talk to me. They tell me what they're doing, where they're going, and what's happening. And that is what I put on paper.
And there's the key word there, that you put it on paper. Are you still an old-fashioned guy? Because you hear about people out there wanting to sell you the template to download on your computer and, to write your book and or take a voice recorder and do that genre. So you're a paper guy? I
am. I like to get the notebooks that you can get from Indigo, the ones with the little ribbon that goes to mark your place and the little elastic strap to hold it shut. I love those notebooks, and I use them to write my first drafts in. So I currently have, I think, three of those books filled. I've got one that I've just started writing a ghost story in, and I've got another which I'm on chapter 26 of writing my novel. But everything I write, the first draft is always on paper in these notebooks, with the second draft then being typed up and changes being made as I type. And I write in pencil, not pen. So I have like a collection.
I love my pencils.
So do I. And I have a collection of, I've got Dr. Seuss pencils, Scrabble pencils, and Star Wars pencils. And I write with those. I sharpen them and I write till they're down to nubs, and then I sharpen them again until there's nothing left.
So how about, because obviously this is fiction. I would hope that this was fiction. How does one go about making sure it's either period correct, or, like, I know it's fiction, so you're allowed to have creative license, but your research to make it believable. Explain to me, like, the research that goes behind writing a fiction book of your genre. or a novelette, I should say, of your genre?
It can vary. It can vary. And it's funny because one of the things that a lot of writers, we're all pretty sure that we're on a list somewhere of some criminal agency like the CIA, the FBI, because I've researched things like Rohypnol,
Okay.
roofies,
Yeah.
for stories, and I've researched things like how exactly a blood spray would come from nicking the nicking arteries, things like that.
Right.
And there's actually groups on Facebook which are very helpful. There's
Okay.
cops and writers where you can ask actual police officers questions for you to help you with
Oh.
your writing. So that those are some great areas of research, just
Mhm.
asking professionals. Other places, just internet searches.
Mhm.
I've done a lot of, like I say, my search history is pretty crazy. I've researched a lot of different things. Some are more mundane, like what happened in this point of history, whereas some
Mhm.
are more along lines of, how does this work? When did this happen? Things like that. And in some cases, like I have a story called Sanctuary, which takes place in the Othello tunnels, which
Mhm.
is just outside Hope, BC. For research for that story, I actually went down to the Othello tunnels and took pictures of everything because I wanted to
Mm.
be as accurate as possible as to what the characters were doing, what they saw, and distances and everything that they would travel. So that
Right.
was very important to me to get it as accurate as I could. I had to do a little bit of stretching for a few things, but otherwise, if you read Sanctuary, like the landmarks, the historical landmarks that actually have the writing telling you about the Othello tunnels, everything there is exactly as it's written at the Othello tunnel. If you were to hold the book up beside those, you're reading the same thing.
Oh, this is incredible. I love reading fiction books that are in settings that I know. And I've
Yes.
been up to the Othello tunnel, so I think I've got to get your book to be able to read it. And then you go back to these places after you've read the story, fictional connected to it, and you really feel like the characters that are there. It's so cool. Wow, what often wondered about the research to make it believable and not just kind of pulled out of your, pardon the expression, pulled out of your tushy, in order to write a story.
Well, even then, sometimes just the imagination.
Right.
There are those things. I mean, written about. I wrote a short story called Dinner Bell about ghouls. And some of the information I got from my next door neighbor who served with the British forces in Afghanistan,
Mm,
whereas some of it I just made up on the fly
right.
because depending on how technical you're getting, you can get away with a lot just by
Right.
using your imagination.
Right. Right. So now we're on to book number 2. So what was the process and how long ago did you write this set of short stories?
Well, After Taste and Other Stories actually grew over a period of time. Um, it's 11 stories, the first of which, well, originally I wrote the story Closet Space back when I first started writing again. I had a long hiatus from writing of like 20, 30 years. And I got back into it. I wrote a short story called Closet Space. And from there, Dinner Bell and then others came out. And I started getting some of my stories published in anthologies.
Mm,
So what I did was I took all the stories that I published in anthologies because after 6 months to a year, you get the rights back from them, the copyright.
okay.
And then I took all these other stories that I never published and I put them all together into After Taste and Other Stories to create an entire collection. And then I just self-published that collection on Amazon and Smashwords.
So is that book, is all the like not the genres, or is it all stories based in horror?
They're all mostly based in horror. The final story is more of a dark fantasy,
Okay.
but each one has a different level of horror. Some like my story Between the Lines is that one's a more subtle horror. Nobody dies in it. There's no
Okay.
deaths in it. In fact, somebody is brought back. But the circumstances surrounding that are where the horror lies.
Mm.
and it is in its own way a horror story. Whereas some of the others, like Sanctuary, is a little bit grisly
Hmm.
with a few character deaths. Uh, and it varies from story to story. I mean, I have a vampire story in there, werewolf story, a ghoul story. Um, there's one about a group of curlers um, and a NHL talent scout. So there's a good variety, and they each take on a different. I feel like they each, pardon the pun, but take on a different taste.
Okay. That's the name of the book. That's the name.
Their taste, another story.
So start to finish on that one, how long did it take you?
In terms of stories, I wrote Closet Space back in 2017, and I wrote Broken probably in February or March. Broken was a very last minute one. I wanted to bump the book up to 11 stories, and I had this idea, so I wrote Broken really quickly. It's approximately just over 2,000 words, but I managed to get it in there and slip it in. So really, that's like 5 years of writing, but different stories at different times. In terms of actually putting the book together, it took me probably a month
Okay.
to figure out, like, to make all the stories, just to polish them up and put them in and decide what order I wanted them in and the format and all that kind of stuff. It took maybe a month.
Okay.
Then I uploaded to Amazon and Smashwords.
Now, what about the editing process, cover design, the stuff that goes into other than writing the books? What's that process look like for you, Brett?
Well, the editing process starts off with that second draft, because like I say, I handwrite the first draft, and then the second draft is actually typed in. It's me typing the first draft in, but I make edits as I go.
Okay.
So the second draft generally looks very, very different from the first one. Once the second one's in the computer, I run it through a program called AutoCrit, which fixes a lot of mistakes, catches things like filler words, if I have slow pacing in paragraphs, if I've done more telling than showing within the story, it helps me catch all those things and make corrections to them. From there, I actually have a group of beta readers, including my wife. And the story goes out to them, and they all get a chance to read it and give me their feedback. Because sometimes they'll catch like spelling mistakes that AutoCrit has missed, just because it's a case of like to TOO as opposed to to TO.
Yes.
Something that AutoCrit might miss or spell check might miss, they will catch it. Also, with the beta readers, they actually will catch things. For instance, the story I mentioned, Between the Lines. When I first wrote it, it was too subtle. I liked it, but everybody said it was too subtle, and I had to make certain aspects of it more obvious, which I wouldn't have caught if it wasn't for my beta readers, who I am so appreciative of. And they help with all my stories in terms of tweaking them and making them the best they can be.
Wow.
So,
and how did you go about finding beta readers?
Well, first of all, there's my wife, but also I have a group of friends who are also horror lovers. And we used to get together pre-pandemic for horror movies all the time. So, like, once a month, we'd all gather together and we'd watch a horror movie together. So I knew some of them were actual readers. So those readers I've just approached about, can you read this story for me? Can you read that story for me? And they've agreed and started giving me feedback.
Oh,
it's been very, very helpful.
So I was reading on your LinkedIn earlier today. It sounds like you have a bit of a super fan in the making. Let's talk about what happened in 2021 for you, Brett.
Oh, yes. There's a blogger in Michigan, and she reviews horror books of all kinds. Her name is Ursula K. Raphael. Her blog site is, blog site is Astrid Damon's Lair.
Mhm.
So Astro Damon, Daemon.
Mhm.
And as I say, she reviews books,
Mhm.
mostly horror. And back in 2021, she read Lord of Playgrounds, and she added it to her list of top reads of 2021. She liked it that much.
Wow.
And that was like the first thing it actually published. She then just recently, she read Aftertaste and Other Stories. And in her review of Aftertaste and Other Stories, she called me her new favorite reader or favorite author, which is just amazing to me. To have
Wow.
somebody give me that credit that I'm their new favorite author. I mean, I know I'll be replaced one day, but that's okay because for now, I'm her
That's
new favorite author,
fantastic.
and that's absolutely amazing. And I'm so appreciative to her.
Wow. So you have your the second book there? I had you grab it. So one
Yep.
of the things that I love to do, oh, great cover, is read the back of the book, please.
Sure. Horror Stories with Bite. Aftertaste. James Havish III is living the high life as one of the undead. One pizza delivery girl, however, will unwittingly change that, leaving James haunted by the very part of him he wants to leave behind. Between the lines, Anthony Cooper would do anything to have his wife back from the dead. When the time comes, however, who is actually paying the price? 100 yards. Cassie Smithers isn't an athlete, only a security guard in the night shift. She'll need every ounce of prowess she possesses, however, when the full moon rises on one fateful December night. Sanctuary. Jamie, Christine, and friends go on a midnight visit to the Othello tunnels for a private viewing of the historic landmark. Jamie has a special surprise hidden there for Christine, unaware that tunnels hold their own surprises. And more.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh my gosh. So at this time, I love to ask my authors, name 3 people that you would say your books would be a good gift for.
Stephen King fans, for sure.
Okay. Okay.
I, as I say, my writing is definitely horror, but it's not more extreme.
Okay.
So I think it's definitely appropriate for people who are Stephen King fans.
Mm-hmm.
I think people who would enjoy it are also movie lovers. I know,
Okay.
so, like for instance, Sanctuary. Everybody tells me that Sanctuary reads like an 80s horror movie. So I'm
Uh,
not sure if that's a compliment or not, but
80s horror movie. Explain to me the genre of an 80s horror movie. I grew up in that period. I'm just trying to bring myself back to that decade.
I think it's more that it's kind of like teenagers being hunted by something.
Okay, okay, okay. Got
I
it.
think that's kind of how it reads. Um, but yeah, everybody seems to enjoy it. They
Okay.
like the ending. So yes, horror movie lovers, Stephen King lovers, and for third, I'm not sure. Just anybody who is interested in something that's short and a little sharp. A
Mm.
story with bite.
Ooh, like it. Not recommended to read before you go to bed?
Yeah, perhaps not.
So they like to call it a beach read. It's so you can read it while you're wide awake and you're able to look at everybody around you.
Excellent read on a beach or on a plane or on a train or on the bus.
Sounds
you know,
great.
the stories are just short enough to last you for one trip.
Oh, that's great. So what's next for Brett O'Reilly in the authorship world?
Well, right now I'm taking a break from my novel to write a ghost story that I went on a camping trip recently and just had this idea for a really short, simple ghost story that I want to write. I
Mm,
don't know when exactly I'll publish it. I'll probably sit on it for a bit.
hmm
In the meantime, I'm on chapter 26 of my debut novel, that which I'm hoping to have published by November.
Ooh,
But
just in
it's a
time for
matter
Christmas.
of getting through the rest of the chapters. It's,
And the overall theme on that book is?
oh, Well, it involves one of the characters from After Taste and Other Stories, one of the survivors of one of the
Okay.
stories. And it's about her and some friends having a very unpleasant encounter
Hmm.
with the dark side of religion.
Okay. Sounds very intriguing. I look forward to having you back so you can discuss your novel as well. So just to kind of wrap this up, you've covered so much different territory for people that are going to watch this either on my Facebook on the replay or Instagram on my YouTube channel. You've covered genres of if I thought I wanted to write a horror or say a supernatural book, or I thought I wanted to write a novelette. That's a word I've never heard of before. You covered about putting your stories that you had released prior and pull them back together, and then you know putting in new stories to make a book. You covered
Yeah.
so many different points out there. What would you say is your words of wisdom, Brett, on how about people wanting to write a book? What would you just say to the people out there?
My biggest piece of advice would be to just to do it. As I said, I stopped writing for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
20, 30 years for various reasons. And when I came back to it, I originally came back to it because I challenged some friends of mine to write a story.
Mm-hmm.
I told them we should all like just write a story to, and share in 3 months. We should all write about something that scares us,
Mm-hmm.
something that terrifies us, like a ghost story or a monster story, something because we all like to write. And the problem was I ended up being the only one to write anything. But the fact is that I made myself write it. And there were times when I really questioned what I was doing, but I
Mm-hmm.
forced myself to write it. And that story ends up becoming what I think is a great story. And that's Closet Space in Aftertaste and Other Stories. Um, but I had to really push myself. And I've been very lucky in that my wife is so supportive of me. And I'm so lucky for that. But in the end, it never would have gotten written unless I made myself sit down and write it.
Right.
And that's why
Right.
I'm on chapter 26 of my novel, because I've had times when I've actually been like, what am I doing? What's
Mm-hmm.
the point of this? Is anybody going to like this? Uh,
Mm.
that's one of the biggest challenges. Like, am I, yeah, to give a perfect example, Stephen King, when he wrote Carrie, he actually tossed the manuscript in the trash. He'd written it, he tossed it in the trash. And his wife, Tabitha King, who's an author in her own right, she dug it out of the trash. She read it. And she handed back to him and said, "You've got something here. Don't walk away from it." And that's like, really, that's the biggest piece of advice I can give any writer. Even if it looks like trash, stick with it, write it. And if nobody wants it initially, rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact is you've got the core idea. Chances are you've got something that works.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to make it work a little better.
Love
And that
that.
makes time. But
Absolutely. Oh, great advice. Great. Sorry, I cut you off there for a second.
no, if it worked for Stephen King to take this thing that he thought was terrible and to rework a little, and it turned into not just a book, but a movie by Brian De Palma and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. It's so easy as a writer to have that self-doubt. But if you keep pushing forward, you never know what can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Please stick around when I come off because I have to take a screenshot for the thumbnail. Thank you so much, Brett. It's great to catch up with you again. We're normally in the, like I said, the community circuit, making sure that we're
Yep.
supporting our respective communities, how we know each other. So as I always wrap this up from my side over here is I encourage you to go to that bookshelf, pull a book off that you haven't read or that you bought and you went, one day I'm going to get around to reading that. Sit down with your beverage of choice, cuddle into your favorite reading spot, take your mind, body, spirit, soul, and new knowledge through the creativity of someone who wanted to share a story with you. And may you be inspired that if you've got a story deep inside of you, get that pen to paper, pencil to paper, however it is, get it out of yourself because somebody will want to read it. Again, thank you so much, Brett, for sharing your story. And I always forget is if you, after you're watching this and you have any questions for Brett about his methodology, his journey, please do put them into the comments of my Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. And he will make sure to come back and answer them. And we will make sure, Brett, we put the links to where people can buy your books in the comments afterwards as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Grab a book and go read.